How would you like to be remembered, Dave Faulkner?
By the songs. That's it. If you know the songs, you know me, because I tell what I'm feeling. They're hidden sometimes, exactly my story, but the essence of me is in there.
Here at the Australian Music Vault today, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome singer-songwriter Dave Faulkner. Welcome.
Hi, Jane.
It's great to have you here.
Absolute pleasure to be here. I'm very excited.
Dave, your contribution to Australian music is undeniable. You've enjoyed a distinguished career. You've been doing it for over 40 years plus.
Yeah.
You've been described as a master pop craftsman, a national treasure, and a great bloke.
Well, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. I don't know which one I should accept, actually. Anyway, well, very kind words of all those things. Obviously, I'd love to say they're all true, and I'll take it.
How do you see yourself?
Songwriter. I mean, obviously, pop craftsman is something that is sort of talked about with my writing. I think that means that the songs are memorable and they stay in people's memories. They're enduring, I guess. They're not just throwaways, is what I hope. And that's what I try to do. I try to make expressions of my feelings that mean something to someone else as well, and they can make them part of their world.
Well, they are part of the fabric of Australian music. I mean, your songs are soundtracks to so many people's lives.
They've been around for a while.
Yeah.
They're staying there somehow. You still hear them now and again.
I'm sure you get people coming up to you all the time and saying that this Hoodoo Gurus track was the track played at fill in the dots.
Yeah, 100%. Usually one song is the most commonly mentioned one, is the song called 1,000 Miles Away is their favourite song mostly. Other songs obviously come up for various reasons, but that's the one that I've noticed the most.
What is it about that song that resonates?
I guess everyone relates to the idea of being away from the people and places they love and want to get back there and pick up their lives instead of feeling with, being at odds with the world. It's a funny thing, when I wrote the song, it actually had an opposite meaning for me, in that I was kind of writing about feeling a bit like I had no place that was my settled down space and could sit there and be happy. I was always on the restless, and that was a song about travelling, looking for something you'd never find. Whereas the song to most other people is about, going back to a place you love, and and it's funny because with the song, both meanings are there actually in the lyrics. So, and the other thing about the song that's weird is that when I wrote it about feeling this, having no sense of, certainty in my life, and where I could sit down and say that I've arrived. I actually have been in the same residence, or same street now since 1984, lived within a matter of a few blocks of the same locus, since 1984, 3 different addresses, but all in the same street, all the same side of the street.
Okay.
So in fact, the last 2 addresses, which was basically 36 years of something like that, have been all within 100 yards of each other. So yes, I do have a place that is my safe space, or something that
so
I don't.
Not so much a million miles away, 100 yards away.
So I guess I do want to be back there all the time. I don't know. I guess I'm speaking about more an emotional place rather than a geographical place, I guess, in the song. And I've always been a little bit disconnected sometimes.
Okay. Well, speaking of disconnection, you were born in Perth, which is quite a while away from Melbourne.
1,000 miles away at least.
Or Sydney at least.
Yes.
You grew up around the eastern suburbs. What's your earliest musical memory?
The Ink Spots on a 78.
Yeah?
My parents had a 78 record player, and the Ink Spots was a record I think I fell in love with. And that song, Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavour on the Bedpost Overnight?
I remember that one.
Yeah, Gracie Fields. So they're the earliest musical memories. And obviously the radio, classical music as well. My mother liked classical music, and I went to concerts, as a little kid as well as, my teenage years. But really the seminal thing was the Beatles.
Yeah.
And my brother, who didn't like school very much, so he left in what's called year 10 now, as soon as he could, 15, he was allowed to leave school, and he got a job as an apprentice printer. And with his small amount of salary, he'd bring home 45s and, there's like the Stones and the Easy Beats and the Kinks and whatever, and the Beatles, of course. And, those songs were what really shaped me as a kid. I mean, it was amazing being 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, and hearing these songs. No one's ever written a song like Satisfaction before. Suddenly you hear it, and it's one of those things that you never forget. The first time you heard Satisfaction, and still sounds good to me.
And it's hard to quantify to people that weren't around then what a big event a new Beatles single
It was
at the time.
Yeah, it was literally like music was being reinvented before your eyes, before your ears. Music was changing so fast. All the arts were changing so fast. The 60s was a very dynamic time. The 20th century was dynamic all through, as we know, but the 60s in particular just seemed to be supercharged, in all the art forms, music, film, fashion. It was amazing, and they were all cross-pollinating. But rock and roll it started off as being, before my time, was obviously the great rock and roll boom of Elvis and the Gene Vincents and the Little Richards and Chuck Berry, and that was the bedrock, which we didn't hear anymore on the radio, but it was what the artists we were listening to grew up on. So we were getting it, in a sense, secondhand, reinterpreted through their ears or their music. But the music we were hearing started off very, naive and fun and really, stuck in your mind. There's catchphrases and stuff, and then it became something else. Bob Dylan came along, and all these different influences that turned into a completely different art form. And as I say, and as you say, just changing from week to week almost. It felt like that. With every new record, there was a whole new movement in music or a new development.
Well, the first song you ever wrote was as an 8-year-old, as you were buying cigarettes for your mother.
Might have been 10. I'm not sure. I can't be sure exactly how old I was. But
You were young.
Yeah, I was.
Can you remember the song?
I remember a little bit about it. It was about the dog. So, I used to, I love singing, and I just for some reason started making up words and singing a tune, and the first thing I could think about was the love of my life, the dog. So my first romantic song.
But this is a recurring theme in your life because everybody thought that My Girl was about a dog.
That's right. Well, because of the video.
Because of the video. Oh, solely because of the video.
Totally the video,
It seems to have followed you around.
Yeah, that video has definitely been a curse, but at the same time, I love the video, so I can't, I don't regret it, but it was a nightmare as far as the fact that people have thought it was, a song about a dog. But, so it was about the dog, and I didn't know it was songwriting then. It wasn't until a few years later I was in high school and had our own little rock group, and we were writing songs, and trying to be like our idols. And so I started writing songs properly. But that was just me, as I say, just singing and amusing myself with music and making up stuff.
I'll go ask you about your picking up an instrument soon, but your mother did love music. Tell us about Mum Faulkner.
Oh yeah, she sang as a kid, a teenager. She grew up in Melbourne, and large family, and she was a pretty good singer, apparently. I mean, I always thought she was fantastic, but other people thought so too. And when she was a teenager, she got on some kind of not Australian Idol, but some kind of idea where you have a contest where someone sings and they get voted on by the audience to stay on for another week. Yeah. So she got several callbacks, so to speak, from the audience. They loved Ruthie's voice, and she's sang on the radio for a few weeks in a row at least, and got a bit of a rep as that. So, and my mother loved music, and as I said, both my parents did, but my mother particularly was probably much more active as far as she liked to sing around the house, and my sister was a great singer. She's a little older than I am, and she actually has the best voice in the family, and so the three of us would sing a lot.
So when did you pick up an instrument?
I was taught. My mother wanted me to learn violin. She had classical pretensions, and she liked the higher classical music, and so she wanted me to learn a violin. I started on it, and I was kind of a little bit unimpressed by it because the songs they teach you in the classical or whatever those sort of music schools, music teachers in those days, it was boring. And I wanted to play pop songs. Beatles. I want to play Beatles. and it wasn't going to happen. So I didn't really take to it. So I gave up after about 2 years. I remember one particular party where Steph played and I was like, I want to play piano. She's getting all the attention. I want the attention. So I demanded I change the piano. So I changed the piano and I did that for a year and the same problem. So I
You got bored?
didn't like the songs they wanted me to play, and I just thought, oh, this is rubbish too. So I just stopped. And so 3 years is all I did. And then I didn't play for about a year. And then I started to just pound on the family piano by myself and just pick out the chords, like played it like guitar, picking out the triads, basically, playing the chords and just singing, Beatles songs and whatever other song.
Your father was diagnosed later in life with PTSD. He was a World War II veteran, and by your own admission, it messed him up.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, fairly, lots of yelling in my house, growing up. My mother was pretty emotional too. She'd had a very difficult childhood as well, and adolescence, awful actually. So they were a very strange pair. They were both very damaged people, and they found each other, and they actually completed each other in a funny way. But as kids, you don't really, you have no insight into that. You only see that they seem to be always at odds and very difficult people, and obviously you love your mum more. Your dad's like this, kind of, especially when he's someone who can yell. A male voice yelling is quite scary for a kid. Mm-hmm. So he was he was a hot-tempered Irishman, even though he's Australian, but his father was Irish, so he had Irish culture in him, and he came from a very strange family as well, because he was raised by his brothers and sisters, because his parents died when he was young. Oh. So he had a very difficult life. It was, turbulent, but not violent, just noisy. And, sometimes, you felt like, why are they together? They just didn't seem to be, happy. Mm. But they were, but it's hard for us kids to figure that out. And, it was a strange background.
What were you like as a teenager? Did you rebel ever?
Well, I was a punk rocker. That's rebelling. But I was never rebelling. Yes. I mean, I was kind of terrible to my mother for a few years there when I was going through puberty, and you kind of, like, as I say, I saw this dynamic playing out before my parents and going, why can't we just, move away from each other and, have some peace? So I was a bit angry at her, partly for that, which later in life I just think, I'm an idiot, She had the right person and he was lovely. In fact, my father had a very soft heart and a very, very, very good man. So it was just weird. But as far as rebelling, I rebelled in the sense that I never really cared I tried to conform a little bit. I went to university to fulfill my supposed destiny. Music was something I always did, but I actually was well known in the family as being someone who's good with their visual arts. And I was a painter, drawer, or whatever. And that's what I was recognised for at my school as well. People thought I was going to be some kind of artist. And my parents, of course, didn't like the idea of doing something so fly-by-night as being an artist, because that's not a real job. So you've got to become an architect. So I kind of tried to follow that, and I went to university and did architecture, and I didn't really do architecture. I enrolled in it, but I never actually attended the classes after the first few, lectures. All I did was play music, and that was when I realised I was a musician. But as far as rebellion goes, no, I wasn't rebellious, but at the same time I wasn't conformist. I was in a Catholic school, and I decided when I was about 15 or 14 I didn't believe in God. And that was a big moment. Wow. And there was a move to try and, to expel me from the school because, I was quite vocal about it. Wow. And then one of the teachers, a Christian brother, said, no, he should stay because, boys will have to see that same in the outside world, so it'd be a good test for their faith, whatever. I don't know how they explained it, but I wasn't kicked out.
Do you believe in any kind of anything out there?
I believe there's a metaphysical realm, and I believe, I believe in some kind of, I don't believe in a deity. I don't believe in a personality, that there's some, higher presence that's directing things or any of those sort of things.
Yeah.
But I believe that there is something about existence that is quite impossible to figure out. That, as a musician, I strongly believe in the energy that happens at a live performance is something special. It's not just literally people clapping and I hear them and I can see them smiling. It's more than that. We are feeding each other in a different level, in a psychic level, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And it doesn't happen over the television or the internet or whatever, or off a record. You get a great experience and you can feel some other energy, but the literal connection between people together, gathered and experiencing something together is, to me, special. And it's I feel both sides. If I've been in audiences of great performers and I've also been a performer with audiences and felt that as well. So that connection is real, and it improves the music because we're on a higher level together somewhere.
You once said that your father wasn't a fan of rock and pop music.
Oh, I'll keep saying it.
Yeah. So what did he think about your career?
Oh, he didn't understand it. He didn't understand rock and roll at all. He thought the kids were hypnotized, basically. They'd been brainwashed, basically force-fed this bad music, and they didn't know any better.
Do you think he was proud of you?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
did he ever tell you that?
He didn't specifically tell me that, no.
Okay.
But, he saw things. There's a very famous episode I've spoken of many times about when, towards the end of my father's life, we were invited to play on board a Navy ship, the Canberra. And the reason was because someone that had been on that very ship had seen an interview where I mentioned my father having served on the earlier Canberra that got sunk in World War II. My father was a young man, 23 years old when it happened. And they, as a result of seeing this interview, they thought, well, I'll use one of this band's songs for our ship's song, because they play it over the PA system when they leave port, arrive in port. So the family who was waving goodbye or saying hello to them hear this song every time, and it became quite a significant song. And also when they meet another ship at sea, they each play their ship's song. I don't know what the other ships were playing, but the Canberra was always playing 1,000 miles away.
There you go.
And when they were decommissioning the ship, they asked us to be part of to play the ball for the crew who are going to be scattered to other ships. Obviously, there's no more Canberra. They're going to sink it and make it into a reef. So they invite us to play the ball, and they also want us to play take the last voyage of the Canberra when it went to Garden Island, Western Australia, off Fremantle there, the base, and play for the base. And we perform for the people on the base with the whole ship's company ranged behind us in formation in their dress whites.
Wow.
It's quite a spectacle.
Yeah.
And the whole day was incredible, like helicopters flying around, news choppers, and the boats with the fire crews, blowing geysers of water over, as a tribute. And it's amazing, the whole spectacle. But the amazing thing about it was that, my father was our guest. I said, my dad to come along as well. And the captain was very much on board with that. And I remember as we were leaving port about 6 a.m., 6:30 in the morning from Canberra to do this last journey. And we were shown to the officers' mess and to have breakfast. And the captain said, "I'll come up when we leave port. I want you to watch as we take off." As we're going up after this breakfast and going up to see the ship take off, my father's saying, "So David, who else is here?" I said, "What do you mean, Dad?" And he said, "Well, who else is here today?" And I said, "No one, just the Hoodoo Gurus and you." It kind of blew his mind, I think, that particular moment, because there's no minister for this or mayor of that or, anyone.
Yeah.
Literally the ship's crew and this rock band and him. And so for him, that was like, and for me, this our two worlds collided in such an incredible way. Who could have dreamed this,
Wow.
would ever happen to either of us?
It's quite a special moment, Dave.
1,000,000%.
Aged 18, you joined local band The Beagle Boys. They're an R&B group and you're playing keyboards. Tell us about The Beagle Boys.
Yeah, well, they were a great group. I mean, they were a bit older than me. I mean, like several of the guys were 21. I was 18. I was so old. And Robert Searles, he was 28 or 29 at the time. He turned 30 just while I was in the band, so it must be 29 when I joined.
Right.
And he'd been in a band called Sid Rumpo, and he'd kind of had a bit of a taste of rock and roll, success. They had a couple of albums and had been an almost make it kind of band. And he came back to Perth and, music was changing. This was talking about the mid-70s. I mean, this is 1976 when I joined. But he started the band in 75, I think. And, he kind of, he designed this band to be kind of the next level up from what he'd just done. And so it had this range of different influences. But the biggest thing was a really strong blues bass. Rob wrote some songs, and they were kind of a mixture of various things. But I was a keyboard player. And I loved it, but to be honest, I'd already kind of moved on past the blues because I was into punk rock at this point.
Yes, and the most exciting music on the planet.
It was. So I wanted to play guitar, so I was teaching myself guitar the whole time I was in the band, and then I was in the band for about 6 months, and one day the bass player said he wanted to go do something a bit more jazz funk related, and so he said, I'm quitting the band, and I said, actually, I am too. I'm going to form a punk rock group. So the band broke up, unfortunately. It was sort of the two of us leaving kind of was the coup de grace. But I regret not having learnt more about the blues when I was with those guys because they were absolutely way ahead of me and they knew so much more, and I could have saved myself a lot of, hours later on trying to, pick up the things that they already knew, and figure out the records that I should have found, long ago.
So you taught yourself how to play guitar. Do you remember that first guitar?
Yeah, it was cost about $80. It was a Maya.
Who'd you buy it off?
A junk shop.
Junk shop?
It was on the wall of a junk shop. It was a SG copy by Maya. Which I think is a Japanese brand.
Right.
And I broke the tuning peg on the they call it number 1 string, which is the high E. And so for most of the band I was in, the Victims, my punk band, I only had 5 strings on that guitar because I couldn't put a 6 string on.
That's so punk rock in itself.
So I recorded television that all those songs with 5 strings on there.
Well, let's talk about the Victims because it is the first band you make your mark in as Dave Flick.
Yeah. So
punk rock. Who was Dave Flick?
Well, Dave Flick was a couple of things. One was my punk name because the Ramones were called, Joey Ramone, Tommy Ramone, Johnny Ramone, whatever. And so it was kind of a thing to, in a sense, create a new identity for yourself because you're part of this new world and you don't have to be whatever you were before. Secondly, it was a way of, I knew that punk rock was controversial, so I thought it'd be a way of shielding my parents slightly from any infamy I might attract, which was true. It did happen that way.
What did you get?
Well, you're a punk rocker and people just think you're,
got safety pin through the lip and
there was no safety pins
trouble.
Involved in our. I mean, there were safety pins on people's clothes, but not on mine. But there was no body modification, and also the name had a personal resonance for me because my nickname as a little kid in my family, with my brothers mainly, was Pest, because I was the little kid. They were, one brother was 6 years older and one was 8 years older, so I was like a nuisance to them. I was like 8 years old and they're 14, 16. So I was the Pest, and I hated that name. And there's a famous ad campaign from a pest exterminating company called Flick in WA, which I remember seeing the posters around, which was one flick and they're gone. So so when I chose a name, I chose Flick as a way of, remaking my pest past and becoming a new pest.
Well, The Victims' Television Addict, a song you co-write, is now considered one of the seminal punk rock independent singles. How much do copies go for on eBay these days?
I haven't looked, but I would think over $1,000.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe more.
It still stands up, Dave.
Oh, yes, amazing song and amazing recording. We did a terrible demo tape on a 2-track in a house one, leading up to that a few months earlier, which was awful. But somehow we got in the studio and we played together and it just all fell into place. And my biggest regret is that we didn't actually have the budget to make an album at that very moment, because the sound of that record is gold. It's just
It
electric.
captures something.
It does.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was magic, really. I mean, James Baker was an incredibly important person in my life. I met James at the first punk rock show in Perth. Official punk rock show was a band called the Cheap Nasties, which I'd been in for 5 minutes a year earlier. I'd rehearsed with them before I joined the Beagle Boys. But I was playing keyboards then, and that became the band that led to Kim Salmon. You know, he became the Scientists, of course, with James Baker, the first drummer of the Scientists, after he left the Victims, when they formed the Scientists. So basically, James came up to me that night at this Cheap Nasties gig where Kim was playing with Neil Fernandez, a good friend of mine from high school. And James just said, let's form a group. He just liked something about the cut of my jib, liked the way I looked and the way I talked, the music, my way I was talking about music when we chatted. And so we did. He was in a group already, but he didn't really think they were going to make it, whatever. You know, he didn't think they were as cool as me. So we formed a group that night. We became the Victims a few months later. It was our first gig. But yeah, that's the way things happened in those days. It was a bit like, you know, kids in the playground. I like you. You're my friend. You know, it was like that. But James was incredible. Like, he was a couple of years older than me. About, I think, 4, as it turns out. And he'd been to London as well. He'd hung out with Sid Vicious, and, you know, in the pub, you know, Sid bought him a beer. And James is incredibly switched on person. He loved rock and roll. He was more advanced in his taste than I. You know, he was into glam rock first. I mean, we all loved glam rock. I loved Suzi Quatro and Gary Glitter and T-Rex and all those things, you know, from that era. Slade. James also was much more in tune with the American scene, like the New York Dolls. I didn't know the New York Dolls. They weren't a hit in Australia on radio as a kid in high school. But he was a few years old. He'd read the magazines from overseas and kind of loved the New York Dolls. And the New York Dolls are one of the most important bands of all time. You know, them and the Ramones, you know, so, and the Velvet Underground. These are, like, you know, cornerstone of alternative rock, in my opinion. MC5. You can keep going, Alice Cooper. But James went over as a glam rocker to New York, to LA first in 1976, early 76. And punk rock was happening in the UK. CBGB's was a scene in New York, of course. Patti Smith had released Horses, but the Ramones album hadn't come out. He was Johnny on the spot for all those things, and he went to New York, then he went to London, and he saw the Pistols, and he auditioned for the Clash, and they wanted him to join.
My goodness, imagine the Clash with James Baker.
Yeah, I know, amazing. Well, they loved him. They thought he was great, but he had to come back. He'd run out of money, and he decided he had to come back to Australia. He'd been away for nearly a year himself, so he was there in 76. But he came back to Perth, and, looking like he did, hasn't changed his look ever since. Had that Brian Jones haircut, which I've only just learned recently. I always thought it was Brian Jones inspired, but actually it's Dee Dee Ramone inspired. He went to LA kind of with the shag sort of, teased hair, glam rock outfit, haircut. Went to New York, went to CBGB, saw the Ramones, cut his hair, looks like Dee Dee Ramone.
Wow.
And never changed. And, had the Beatles suit because he loved the Flamin' Groovies. They were kind of in this sort of this retro Mersey beat thing.
Yeah.
So whatever, he had his look. But James was just such a cool guy and had impeccable taste and still does. He just knew what he liked, and he liked the right things for the right reasons and disliked the right things for the right reasons.
Right.
As well. As much as things you don't like, as much as things you do like, that kind of show what you're about.
Were you a little bit in awe of him when he got back and was regaling you with these wonderful
No, because
tales?
we were all passionate about punk rock. So we were all discovering it together. And he was so cool. I mean, I describe him as our Marco Polo because he had war stories. He was there on the front line, so to speak, seeing these people, being in these clubs that we could only read about. So that was impressive. And he was also brilliant. He's a very funny songwriter. He wrote most of the lyrics of Victims. I finished off the lyrics in Television Addict, but he started the lyric, and his ideas are all wonderful. And he had an attitude and character and charisma. He had all those things, and so yes, we were impressed. But at the same time, we were full of charisma and attitude ourselves. We were all, it's Kim Salmon. These people aren't, pushovers. We weren't just, nobodies that suddenly, got touched by greatness and turned into something. It wasn't like that. But we all found each other and related.
Yeah. And you're still friends to this day, aren't
Oh,
you?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through some ups and downs, all of us.
Yes.
And, my thing with James obviously is well known because, we sacked him from the Hoodoo Gurus, which caused incredible, consternation and much gnashing and wailing, gnashing of teeth and wailing. But also Kim and I have had our ups and downs as well. Mm-hmm. But, the fact is these people are remarkable and we respect each other and also have this deep history that we share. So we're never going to really fall out. We're just going to sometimes go like, I don't want to see that guy for a while, And that certainly happened with James and I, obviously from actually quite a few years with James and I, because of the thing with him being sacked from the band was quite, very controversial.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that one of the first singles you co-write is Television Addict, because the concept of your favourite TV shows and films would form a lot of the ideas and titles in the Hoodoo Gurus.
Yeah, well, that's something that James and I bonded over as well. Like, we're from the same generation, it's hard for people to imagine now with, cable TV and YouTube and all those things.
Yeah.
There wasn't even VCRs then.
No.
You literally, what came down the television, you had one chance to see it, it was
Appointment
gone.
viewing.
And also Australia had the unique situation where we were late to adopt colour television. America got colour television in the 60s. We didn't get to 1975.
That's right.
So that meant that we had black and white TV for all that time. So all these old shows from the late 50s on, things like Car 54, Where Are You, The Honeymooners, I Love Lucy, they were shown on regular television. And I was a latchkey kid. Both my parents worked. So I'd come home from school. As soon as I went to primary school, my mother got a job. So I was always basically, up till 5 or 6 o'clock, basically, looking after myself. So on with the TV and watch, F Trip.
Brilliant. At the age of 21, you head overseas, which you mentioned earlier. What do you remember about your first trip away? 1979.
Two things. Firstly, when I went to London, because I went from Perth, because that's where I lived, obviously, and I went to London, and it was 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It was so dark. That was shocked me because I come from hot weather to this bleak, dark, depressed-looking place. And the other thing about it was that shocked me was the colour of the countryside. It was so lush and green, and I'm used to the sort of more canvassy, grey-green colours of Australia, especially WA, which is such a dry, unchanging environment. And I found Europe kind of a little bit bilious, it was too rich. And also seeing bands like I saw the Buzzcocks, who I love, and they just released a second album, I think, and I saw them do a concert, and I'm like, oh, well, they're not that great.
No.
I just thought that could be like me and the Cheap Nasties at the Hernando's Hideaway where we played. It was it felt like the same level of expertise.
Oh, right.
I thought I'd actually get a far more, wow, this is the Buzzcocks and how incredible. It was like Buzzcocks are just like any band I could see at a pub. Is how it felt, which is a good thing actually. But it's just that it was I had to readjust my mentality.
Okay.
Anyway, so I went from there to New York. I was only in London for about 6 weeks. I went to New York, and that was a completely different picture. That was kind of like when I went, oh, okay, this is where I want to be.
Wow.
This is, I had the strangest feeling when I was in Times Square. I didn't know a soul in New York, and I had a cheap hotel in just off Times Square. In those days, Times Square was very rough.
Oh, yes.
Scary.
Yes.
It's all the porn parlors.
The porn parlors.
And all the drug dealers and all those things, and prostitution and you name it. It was very seedy and scary.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And, I was 21 years old, and I felt like I was home. Why should I feel that? I'm from Perth. I have no knowledge of this place. I mean, I've seen them. But it was weird. And I remember I actually literally had a feeling I'd been there before.
Right.
And I don't know what that was, but...
Past life of some sort.
Yeah. But But all I know is that I just loved it, and I saw incredible bands, and the music in New York was far better than London. I'm sorry, you know, no offense, but you know, I went to CBGBs and I went to Max's Kansas City, and you know, I saw so many things that basically was what shaped the Hoodoo Gurus. That's when I was able to finally. I mean, I'd already outgrown punk. I was sick of it when I'd formed a band in Perth before I left, which is the one that I actually made the money to save up for my trip. Was a band called the Midget and the Farrellys. It was a covers band, basically. And we deliberately were kind of like cabaret in a way. And it was designed to be very quiet music where we just have a column PA and not even have to have a stage, just sit up in the corner of a lounge bar and we played lots of crappy 60s songs and stuff like that, which nowadays everyone knows, oh, you play 60s, you know, that was a thing. And back then it wasn't. 60s was, we were talking about 1979, 78, 79. And it was the end of 78. The 60s were still fresh, and everyone's like so sick of that crap, and it was like, you know, so uncool, you know, and we were playing the uncoolest stuff from that period, the early 60s stuff, Perry Como, things like that, Doris Day songs, and Power of Strength by Gene McDaniel, just weird stuff, and but also playing a Ramones song or two, you know, just eclectic, and it was strangely somehow it succeeded beyond any expectation, and suddenly we're getting all this money, and we had no overheads because we literally had no production, no crew, just carry everything ourselves, and we just made so much money hand over fist. Anyway, that's how I saved to go away.
Yeah, right.
But I'd already repudiated punk by joining that group. A lot of the punk fans were like, "How dare you? You know, you've betrayed, you know, punk. You're playing in a covers band doing 60s music." And, you know, I deliberately did that to kind of like, in a sense, burn my bridges. Just as I had burned my bridges leaving the Beagle Boys, that blues audience were horrified by the victims. Yeah. And I used to love that, actually, that feeling of like, slam a door and never look back, you know. And anyway, so and punk rock had been, as far as my tastes going, that was a pivotal time for me. I'd, in a sense, thrown away all the stuff from my growing up period, you know, the music I didn't relate to or whatever, and some stuff I did relate to but thought I shouldn't like that anymore because it's uncool. Punk's the thing. And punk was a purification. It was a pinch point where your taste got basically forged in, you know, and all the base elements were burnt off. It was just the ore was left there in that crucible. And then later it was like, okay, well, that's great, but I need more. And so I was looking to diversify my tastes again and discover music that I hadn't considered, and that was like things like country music, things like that. And that was what was happening in New York. A friend from DBs, Will Rigby, the drummer for the band called the DBs from North Carolina, he said, "You've got to listen to this album that came out recently, this RCA reissued Elvis's first recordings with at Sun Studios with Sam Phillips producing the Sun Sessions. They put it together on one album. And that was a revelation because I didn't like Elvis, and the Victims even had a song called I Hate Elvis, which we thought we should, you know, because Johnny Rotten didn't like him. When he died, he made some, you know, disparaging comments with it. Us too, we wrote a song, you know, and it ripped from the headlines. Yeah. And then, you know, so hearing Elvis back when he was 18 years old and inventing rockabilly music was what he was doing, combining blues and country and hillbilly, whatever, and gospel as well, and making this strange fusion. It was so exciting. And so suddenly I was able to understand through Elvis, I got to Hank Williams, you know, I got to pure country, which I'd always kind of never really understood. And so that was so suddenly doors opened musically where I could suddenly discover this whole world of music, which I'd previously been blind to. And it happened with so many other genres. And I was already, you know, digging deep into the roots of punk as well with the 60s punk, you know, psychedelic garage music from the 60s and Nuggets music. So it was a whole learning. It was like a study vacation, really, is how it felt to me the whole time I was away, and especially in New York and you know, the bands I saw as well, seeing the Cramps, the Fleshtones, the B-52s, and the, you know, Xanties. I mean, as I mentioned, the DBs, who were an incredible band. You know, Joey Lee Lewis in a club. You know, John Cale as well. You know, just the things. You know, just you can't imagine. And you see them you have to see it in a big concert theatre somewhere, or, you know, festival. But these are in a nightclub. You know, playing to, you know, 300 people, 500 people. You know, you have a table and you there's Jerry Lee Lewis over there, you know.
You got back from overseas and you joined Perth-based band called The Mannequins
Yes.
for 9 months with your friend and main songwriter Neil Fernandez.
Yes, that was the Cheap Nasties. That they became the
Cheap
Mannequins.
Nasties became The Mannequins.
Yeah.
What was it about Neil and the band that you were drawn to?
Well, good friends, loved them all as people. I'd been in the band at one point, as I say, for 5 minutes when they first started. Kim had left by this point. Kim had formed the Scientists after I left Perth and the Victims had broken up. He left the Mannequins before, left the Cheap Nasties before that, by the way. He didn't leave because of that. He'd left the band and formed other groups. The punk scene was people always forming groups and breaking up and starting new ones.
Going.
Oh, yeah. That was the best thing about it, actually. Yeah. There's always something happening. It was, friends, I like their music, obviously. So that was it. And we did the song Tojo, which I'd written a few months earlier, and My Girl. I'd written that one.
Right.
They'd done a tour to Sydney and Melbourne on their first single, and they were planning on doing another one. And I thought, well, I've been in London and New York, and I just thought I can't live in Perth anymore. I wanted to live in a bigger city. I just knew that. Needed to get that feeling of, something
Neil
happening.
didn't want to relocate the band because he was studying at the time.
No, he never wanted to relocate the band, but he talked about touring.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that'll do. I want to, at least have a look over there and see what's going on over there, being over here, in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I joined, and they were supposed to play a month later, do this tour they'd been planning. And he said, we can't do that yet. You just joined and we've got to work you in properly. So we'll have to postpone it to the next semester break because Neil was studying. And he was very diligent about his studies. And as it ended up, he became a public servant and a career public servant.
Which is really interesting to me that Neil chose the public service over music because usually it's the other way around.
Right.
What did you think about that?
I couldn't understand it, but I, at the same time, just as I had when I was doing architecture, I had no choice. I was a musician.
Yeah.
I didn't choose music. I just was a musician.
Yeah.
And that was never in doubt for me after that. Neil was in doubt. Neil had anxiety issues, apparently. I only learnt later on more about that. But he didn't like dealing with crowds and stuff like that. So, in fact, he was pretty mixed feelings. He loved music, but he didn't like playing in front of people. And also he was probably torn between, trying to be responsible and, he ended up, raising, getting married and having a family. And these are things that, having a dependable job was important. So and he probably could sense that even then. That's what he wanted.
So you leave Perth for Sydney and form the Hoodoo Gurus New Year's Eve, 1980. You form the Hoodoo Gurus at the age of 23, or Le Hoodoo Gurus.
Le Hoodoo Gurus. Thank you.
As you were known. Now, much has been documented and said about the Gurus' history, so I'm keen to slightly veer off into a different direction, but let's talk about the band's first ever television appearance on an afternoon kids show that I love to watch called Simon Townsend's Wonderworld.
That's it.
Now, this is the same show that gave In Excess their first big break. They were featured on there with Simple Simon and the Duke Guides, band from WA, and many other bands. You were Les Hoodoo Gurus then, and you had no bass player. Tell me about appearing on Wonderworld.
Well, first, no bass players because we just didn't happen to have one. When Kimble and Rod and I met on that roof on New Year's Eve and talked about let's form a group, because we were talking about the different artists that we liked that weren't things we were hearing in the bands that we saw around town. There's the Radio Birdman and its kind of descendants. Then there was the sort of art rock scene. We're talking about inner city music now. And there was this whole gulf, we're going, where's all this other stuff that I've been seeing in New York and blah, blah, blah. So Kimble was involved with film.
Yes, Kimble Rendall is a renowned name with The Matrix and various other films.
Yeah, he did
and
second unit
videos.
on The Matrix films and he's directed films and he's worked on a lot of things and quite an amazing person as a filmmaker. And he knew that. That's actually where his fortune lay. But he did love rock and roll and he wanted to play in a band for a while and until he was forced to choose by, circumstances. He decided, what am I doing with my life? And he chose film. Kimble knew people in the film world, obviously, and he knew people from the Wonderworld team, the production teams, and he managed to persuade them to let do a story on us, because they used to do, as you mentioned, these different bands, young bands. We had no record contract, had no new music, and the producer was asking, how the hell is this? What are we doing a story on this group for? And they kind of followed them off and said, like, well, we're doing it about a group forming so the kids can see how you form a group. And so we'll show them a band that's forming. Of course, it had no educational value at all about forming a group. It was just us jumping around to some bad demos we recorded at M Squared Studios. So that's what happened there. We did that. But the funny thing was, when we taped it, it took a long time for it to actually come out. It's probably about nearly 3 months, felt like 3 months. And we hadn't even done a gig yet. And in fact, the first screening of our segment was the day before we did our first ever show. So we were on TV first.
That's brilliant.
Was always our famous, claim to fame. We felt that, we were going to the world over the worldwide television instead of the internet. The TV was big news back then.
You lose the Le and you gain a bass player. Kimble Rendall swapped his guitar for a camera and never looked back. Roddy Radar soon followed.
Rod left. Kimble left first, then Roddy left a few months later, because we actually had Clyde in the band for a while, and Rob was liking it, but then he kind of got cold feet about, we've lost our gimmick, is what he told me. And so he also wanted to form his own group and be the leader. So he formed the Johnnies. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, no timeline specific, but you also gained Brad Shepherd and Clive Bramley from the Hitmen. You signed your first proper record deal, and Tojo and My Girl are released in succession, and I think the rest is history. You said that you were kind of taken as a joke when you got signed up as far as the proper industry was concerned. Why do you think that was?
Because we weren't playing electronic music, with like Human League, Thompson Twins, all these things were all over the radio, and that's all anyone would listen to. And guitars were old hat, And there was this thing, there's even the term called rockist. If you remember Music Pressed. Yeah. So they're rockist. They're not like the new thing of like, we don't play guitars, we don't play that rock. We play the new music, which is not rock. And, and so we were very unashamedly rockist in the sense that we just play guitars and, because that's what we happened to play. It wasn't because we were trying to make a statement about guitars versus synths, but it was taken that way. And certainly the industry thought we were a bad bet. You wouldn't have a band like that, the music they're playing, because we were still from that kind of underground sound of rock and roll and things that were never cool. I mean, punk rock hadn't broken the mainstream yet. It wasn't until really, those pop punk bands that it became, Green Day, people like that that it made punk acceptable.
Yeah.
Elvis Costello, new wave was acceptable, but, so to speak. But, so we were just this band that was playing this stupid music on these stupid instruments, and they look stupid too.
See, as a child growing up in the 80s, the Gurus to me were omnipresent because it was that unique combination of that garage 60s rock, the surf psychedelic, the well-crafted songwriting, ready for radio songs. And TV loved you guys because you had the array of paisley shirts, the ever-changing headbands, Dave Faulkner.
Well, haircuts, as my hair receded
we
badly.
We could go through hairstyles of Dave Faulkner through the ages, couldn't we?
I know, it's frightening.
When did it actually dawn on you that you were famous?
Probably, when we lost our heads for fame was 87, for What's My Scene era, that third album.
Why do you say lost your heads?
Well, we kind of got lost. We'd made the first album, which was, pretty much, just what was the early development of the group and what happened to be, what we were. Then we wrote the second album, and when I made a deliberate kind of stepping up as a songwriter, I feel, and to become more the writer I've always been since then, where I stood up as a songwriter and wrote about real things rather than imaginary scenarios, which the first album had a lot of that. Mm-hmm. I want to write less cartoon and more actual emotional things. And musically too, I sort of, I threw out any sort of restrictions and just didn't try to conform to any sort of, perceived, genre. And then, so those were two things. And we had a lot of success in the second album. That was kind of when we kind of broke through the mainstream more. The first album, it's funny. It's like, it's always talked about as being this, fabulous record and how, you know, everyone loves it, it's acclaimed, whatever, it's a great debut album. And we won a Countdown Award for Best Debut Album.
1984, I believe it was, yeah.
But the thing was, that was a surprise to everybody because it was supposed to be Studio Echo or Kids in the Kitchen was supposed to win. In fact, the camera was on Studio Echo when they announced the winner, and they completely didn't know where the hell we were in the auditorium, and it was truly not meant to happen. And the industry itself voted for that, and they were all, and the industry itself went, wow, we voted for them. Wow, that's cool. They didn't. No one thought we were going to win, especially us.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. So we did win that award because we weren't a countdown band, so to speak.
Weren't.
You know that term, countdown band.
Yeah.
And then the second album came along, and then, of course, it had these huge hits, Bittersweet and Like Wow Wipeout.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of took us into the mainstream, really. And then the third album was kind of like, and we toured America with both albums, but we were having a lot of success in America as well, as far as like the huge crowds and doing well.
You were very big on the college circuit.
But that meant, we were playing, lots of big bills and having a lot of fun. And we weren't allowed to, we got a producer forced upon us, which we didn't want. And we kind of...
Was that the record company foisting that on you? Right.
Yeah. And we wanted to use Charles Fisher again, who did the second album.
Yes.
And we weren't allowed to because he was having a dispute with them about royalties.
Oh, boy.
About something else that they... And so we had a different producer than we wanted, and that wasn't a pleasant experience. He wasn't a producer that was really simpatico with us. And on top of that, we kind of got a little bit probably thought we could make a hit here. And that's a mistake.
Yeah.
So the record kind of was a little bit unfocused. And, I thought the songs were better than the recording of the songs.
But isn't it funny, your favourite song of all time that you always refer people to is What's My Sing
from
that record?
I don't dislike the songs. I mean, some of the songs on that record I do regret. I think I could have written better songs or not been quite as... I should have been a bit more rigorous. But that song I have no flaw. It's flawless, other than the fact that there's things about the recording I don't like. But, there's things about the recording I do like.
Right.
As well. So it's a mixed thing. But that's true of every record, to be honest. Even the ones that I love, I still think, that could be better.
Right.
But that album in particular is the one that we most do not enjoy listening to as a recording process, and to remember the process as well. It wasn't fun to make it. And just to think about where the band was, I mean, I don't want to... Well, Brad went a little bit Guitar Hero-like around that time. He was very impressed by Eddie Van Halen, and it got worse after the record, actually, and then it was cured by the time the next record came along. But we were starting to get sort of a little bit sort of unfocused.
Okay, so
it was a little bit. I was writing more like I could have a hit here, which was a
Right.
stupid way to think.
Right.
So some songs that I thought would be a hit, they weren't. They was never going to be a hit, and they weren't. They were.
Okay.
They actually ended up in the scrap heap, some of them. But it was just a little bit. Our heads had been turned a bit.
Okay.
So that was.
And are you
asked
saying
me
that was
when we were-
fame? Was that fame?
I think it was fame.
That?
I think it was the success we'd had, and we were thinking we could have more of this if we just keep doing what we're doing, and aren't we great? And it was wrong.
Right.
You got to just forget that shit and just make the music and make the, and that's what happened after that.
Okay.
We went back and found ourselves on the next album, which we produced ourselves and didn't think about anyone else ever again. And, including the audience. We just did what we felt like doing.
Dave, you once said, I've never really been comfortable with the idea of being a front person. I
Yep.
just see myself as the singer in the band. It's like a safe space for me. Where does that come from? Is that natural humility?
No, it's that's how I feel myself. I mean, I'm a bit. I've slightly modified that view. I mean, I'm a bit more comfortable now trying to be a front man. Trying to talk to the audience. As in not showbiz, but put on a performance. I'm a bit more comfortable doing that than I used to be.
Okay.
I never liked being recognised in the street.
Why not?
Well, who does?
What kind of things do people tell you when they recognise
Well,
you?
mostly
in the
nice
street?
things, but
Yeah.
but I don't like being seen. I don't like being looked at.
And yet you're a frontman of a band.
Yeah.
And you're the focal point.
By necessity.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I've accepted that now more and more.
Okay.
But at the same time, I've always felt very strongly about my role as a writer and creating this music. I mean, I have a lot to say about a lot of the arrangements
Yes,
in
you
the
do,
music. And, that's part of what I write. So that part I'm very happy to embrace. But as far as the public, no, I didn't enjoy that. And like as a writer too, I mean, I loved you asked me how I felt as a kid, was an outsider or a rebel or whatever. This goes back to that. I mean, I loved being on a bus and not being seen, but seeing everyone else and seeing what they were doing and writing their stories in my mind.
Right.
But when you're being looked at, you can't write their stories. You're the story.
You mentioned Brad. We've got to talk about Brad.
Yeah.
Who it's fair to say was the pin-up of the Hoodoo Gurus.
Apparently, yeah.
Yes.
Which was actually a great relief to me, I got to say. It took the pressure off me. Because I never felt particularly like I should be, So I'm glad there was this guy that drew that attention.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if that was a position he was comfortable with or not. Maybe he was, but every band in the 80s had a pin-up, right?
Yeah, Brad, and it's funny. We're just seeing looking at some old photos recently for a repackage we're doing about one of our early records. And it's amazing how young poor Brad was, back then. Like he was 22 or something when he joined the band. And he looks it. Like he's always been a young-looking fat man, but seeing him as a young man is like, oh, what a baby, It's incredible. No, he's a fantastic fellow.
Let's talk about the US and the role it played for the Gurus in your career trajectory. You mentioned Stoneage Romeos went to number 1 on the
college charts. All the albums went
7
really
weeks,
high on the college charts, yeah.
Your first tour in 84.
Yep.
What was that tour like?
Tremendous, and as I'd spent, as 5 months in the US and loved, and I travelled around the Greyhound bus, so I'd seen a lot of the US, but, going there and playing is another story again. And you meet, and that's the best thing about being in a band, which is a bit, to say join the Navy, see the world. Same thing, joining a band, you get to go to places that, just like a tourist does, but the best thing is you actually meet people on the ground who you're working with, and so you have a deeper connection than just going, talking to a shopkeeper or a waiter, You literally, you form friendships and you have this other, relationship. So, yeah, we loved working in America, and I love that feeling of, especially in the South, it's like, we felt like a worm going inside an apple. You're burrowing down. You're sort of eating them, and from the outside world has no knowledge of what's going on inside. You're lost in America, and you're just having the time of your life, and no one else can see what's happening. That's how we felt. We just had a ball.
And then in 85, 86, you toured the US with the Bangles, a double headline tour that kind of became more about them as they blew up.
Yeah, in the first tour, yeah, definitely. And then the second one, of course, we were supporting. But the first tour was meant to be a co-headline. But Manic Monday came out just before the tour started, and that was kind of like, goodbye.
You were watching that
That's
blow
all she
up.
wrote, as they say,
Yeah.
But we loved the Bangles, and they loved us too.
Yeah.
And we still are very firm friends to this day. But... yeah, it was tremendous. Like, it's funny enough, early on in the tour especially, there was almost like a backlash against the Bangles because they had this sellout hit, written by Prince. It wasn't even their own song. So there was all these people that liked both bands, but like, we think you're cooler. So we had that. But of course, later on, as the tour progressed, and they went to number 1, a few weeks into the tour.
Wow.
And, we started to play more like arenas, like these small arenas, and then bigger. And the last show was in the Greek Theatre in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And, it was tremendous. But, of course, their fans were like, who's this other band? Because the Bangles were the big noise for them. They'd had a couple of hits by that time because it was funny when Thick and Fast up for them,
Yeah, yeah. You record Good Times and your American record company thinks it'll be a hit because the Bangles are on it. But
yes.
It didn't do so great, did it, Dave?
No, it was a big disaster. Well, what happened was we played in the US, then we did the 80s. That was the second album. And then we went back for a follow-up tour in 86. So 85 was good. It was Muzzy's Guitars, and we toured with the Bangles. And they had their big success. And then following year, we toured again because they were still, they went out for another tour because they were still huge. And this time we supported because we had such a great time together, and they wanted us on with the same agency over there as well. So it was like it was an easy thing.
Yeah.
And then we said, well, how about you come to Australia? Because we're you can support us there, which made sense, believe it or not, because, we had big hits in Australia. So they could support us and it wouldn't be like, who's supporting who? Like, it was obvious that they would support us, but it'd be a great bill.
Yeah.
And so that was our plan, was to have them come out maybe 87 or something like that. And I had this song I'd written for the Deltones. There was a thing about probably 85, 86. Someone had decided, we're going to get the Deltones to do an album of new songs by new writers. And they approached me to be one of the writers. They probably asked Don Walker as well, but whatever, whoever's out there, Paul Kelly, I'm sure probably got the question. And so I wrote the song Good Times for them, and it never got used. They didn't make this record, as it turned out. But I had this song lying around. I thought, well, this would be a good song for when the Bangles come and play with us in Australia. We might have this song as an encore together, and we'll sing that song. So I had this in my mind as being a good song for both bands to sing together. And then when we recorded the Blow Your Cool album, I thought, well, let's get them on this song. I've had this in my head anyway. So Brad went over to LA with the tapes because he was dating Mickey Steele at the time, the bass player, and they did an incredible job. So we had thought of it as a B-side. But the song was so good. As soon as the Bangles put their voice on, I was like, oh, we can't leave this off the record. It sounds amazing. So we put it on the album, and then, of course, that's where the problem started, because the American record label was like, aha, here's our chance to break this band in America. We've got this successful pop act, and they can get on the coattails of them and get on the charts. And we said, but what about this other song, What's My Scene? It's pretty good, it's done well in Australia. And like, no, that's for college. That's not for commercial radio. You don't know our market. And we tried our best to persuade them otherwise, but they wouldn't be swayed. And they got to the point where they were almost saying, begging. We beg. They literally said this to us, actually. We beg you, don't stop us having this hit. We know what we're doing. We can do this.
Right.
And so we got to the point where it would be a negative, where they'd be saying, these guys just don't get it. You know? So we had to go with their strong advice.
Yeah.
It was a flop. It didn't do, because it was not a Bangles single, and people therefore, and our worry was that they would hear that and not understand the rest of our music, because it was a bit of an outside sort of song.
An anomaly, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what happened. And What's My Scene kind of got shuffled away to the Not Matters, never got its chance to be pushed to real radio over there, which was a crime in my opinion. So that's what happened. But then, of course, afterwards they said, I guess they weren't ready for it. Success after all. It was never their fault. It was our fault all along.
I mean, America was the holy grail in the 80s, and you had a lot of
it's a huge
well,
market.
of course, if you can crack America, you've
it's
made
half
it.
the world's market in one country.
Exactly. You had a lot of underground success there, but not mainstream success. No. Are you okay about that?
Yeah, sure, totally. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We were playing several thousand seaters. That's not a small thing. It would be nice, for my accountant to be worrying about my tax bills, because you're such a wealthy man. But because that's what American success could have led to.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But we had a lot of fun. We got a huge following over there. A lot of and we enjoyed ourselves immensely. And at the same time, we didn't lose our identity. We kept being who we were. We never, for example, after the fourth album, we didn't even give a demo to a record company. We made it without a record label because we were suing the first company, and we were still in.
Why were we suing them?
They hadn't paid us some royalties. And in fact, we have still huge legal overhang from all that time.
Really?
We don't have the rights to our first album in America still. Never got a royalty for it. But the thing with... so we made this record. Basically, we started as demos, and then we ended up just finishing off the record. So I ended up being the producer. We had Alan Thorne, mind you, who produced the first album as an engineer, so safe hands anyway. But we never gave a demo to a record company, and we never had ever since. So from our fourth album on, we've had total control of our career. So every record deal, we've had several labels we've worked with. We're on Universal now, but they don't ever expect to have any say over the music. They just, they know that they're going to get a Hoodoo Gurus record, and they'll figure it out after that.
Yeah, I think they know about the quality control they're going to get. At the
right. Well, I hope so.
By this
well, sometimes I don't know about the quality control, but, we've made some big blunders along the way. And,
what would you consider blunders?
Songs that went on the record that should have been the B-side, and B-sides that should have been on the record.
Right.
songs we chose as singles.
Right. By the time your 90s albums Crank and Blue Cave come out, you were having something of a personal crisis, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the sense was that the critics and audiences were no longer interested in you, or that's what you felt at the time.
That was in my justification for breaking the band up. Not so much the critics. I never worried about that. And not the audience. It's just that I said we don't want to wait till that is happening where the audiences don't want to come and see you. We are literally like, oh, they still here? And when people stop coming and you're embarrassing yourselves because, you used to be well-known and successful and now you're just like, look what they've been reduced to. That's what I worried about.
Right.
But it never happened. We were going great guns and I just wanted to quit while we were ahead. That's what my theory was. But I was actually having difficulties, and that wasn't to do with that. It was to do with the fact that, firstly, I told you that I produced that album, Magna Cum Louder, the fourth album. I also produced the one after it, Kinky, which is the one that has 1,000 Miles Away and there's Free Love on it.
Yes.
And the rest of the band were getting a little bit jack of me being the boss in every respect. I'm the songwriter, but also, I'd call them the shots in the studio, and they were feeling a little bit, put upon. And so they wanted to have an outside producer. So the guy who mixed that album, Ed Stasium, produced the next album, Crank. And that was quite a difficult experience for me. Firstly, because, the insult, so to speak, no longer want my services aren't required, just write the songs and shut up. Like, well, it doesn't work like that. But secondly, it sort of went further. It was kind of almost like it felt a little bit like, this is how I felt. They'll say otherwise. But it felt to me that I was being, in a sense, you say you do less and that means there's more for us. Yeah, we'll be saying more. But the fact you're saying less, it's a bit like you tell. I can't really give a metaphor because it'll sound really egotistical, but it felt like I was being inhibited.
Right.
And it's like one thing to say don't produce.
Right.
It's another thing to say don't write.
Okay. All right.
I felt like I was being told not to write as much.
Okay, because the others wanted to contribute.
Yeah,
in the writing process.
but also my ideas were sort of being like
negated,
looked down upon. And it's like, well. This is what I do, actually. This is why I'm here.
Right.
I'm not here because I'm the sexy lead singer. I'm here because I am the songwriter.
Right.
So don't throw that baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, I understand I've been a bit, over the top in front of the production side. You want a rest. But maybe, that other stuff was they went too far the other way.
Okay.
So I was very unhappy and making that record, very unhappy, making the Crank album. But at the same time, I wrote some great songs, including The Right Time, which is a song I really love, which saved the record, actually, because the record is a bit patchy in terms of, I think it's a great record, but it's kind of hard going in places. So anyway, I was kind of a little bit, I had a bad time, which I deserved. As I say, I'd been over the top, become a bit of a dictator. So I had to be put in my place, and I probably went too far the other way. And then the next record was in Blue Cave, and we had a ball making that record. So in a sense, I guess, if you want to look at the Beatles as a metaphor, when they made Let It Be and the White Album even, they were kind of falling apart a little bit. That's how we were in Crank. And then we made our Abbey Road was in Blue Cave, was an album that we were all very happy and was wonderful. And then it was like, you know what? We could stop here. It'd be good. So that was when I decided to stop the band. And then, what happened was I kept writing songs that should have been Hoodoo Gurus songs, and I didn't have anywhere to put them. And so it took 6 years for me to finally get off my high horse and put the band back together again.
Well, the thing that strikes me about your career is how you've gone from punk rock dog collars around the neck to mainstream pop, obviously, with the Gurus. But you've still...
And now...
Playing
with an orchestra. Oh, playing my songs on an orchestra with the Hoodoo Gurus playing as well. It's insane. You've come right round full circle. You've still managed to retain your credibility and your longevity, which is remarkable. And you've never wavered when it comes to writing a great pop song, Dave Faulkner. Yeah, when people say pop song, it's I just write songs,
Okay.
I mean, I admit, they're kind of in that side of the ledger, that they are tuneful and, their lyrics aren't, obscurist. They're very kind of direct because I write conversational songs. I mean, Stephen Sondheim did the same thing. He likes, conversational songwriting, and that's what I do too. Yeah. I like them to actually, you know what I'm saying, and to get a meaning. And the same thing with the melodies. I like people to actually hear a melody, not just to feel like it's So
Well,
that's pop, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they're immediate.
who has been inspirational to you in terms of your ethos around not only in music but around the relationships that you form?
Obviously, I'm inspired by the artists I love, and that's it keeps growing every year. The people that music you discover. That's the great thing about music; it's endless. I was inspired by a band called the Fleshtones when I saw them in New York. They were the one that crystallized things that I'd been feeling, and I saw someone doing that, and I could never. We can't be the Fleshtones. They were like unique. But that to me is important as the Ramones in some ways. The Ramones are the most important band for me. Beatles, Ramones, Daylight. Then the Fleshtones would be up there as well. I mean, it's a cheap answer, but I just said the Beatles because it was a kid. It's the thing that when you that
So formative.
first insight into the world of music and what incredible talents they are. To this day, I'm still blown away by them. And I saw Paul McCartney on his tour. And, there was a moment in the show where he starts singing the song Blackbird.
Oh.
And it's completely solo guitar playing Blackbird and with that incredible finger picking, which is quite tricky. Anyway, so he's doing that song and his voice is not great anymore. I mean, he did a pretty damn good job most of the night, but that particular song, he'd actually broken a few places, but touchingly to the point where I felt immediately like this is literally the essence of this man right here. He's on this acoustic guitar, playing that right this minute. He's singing, his voice is going to break, but he's still singing the song and it's going to be literally, unrepeatable. You know what I mean? That I talk about the spirit of a performance and the audience and the performer. He was raw and real in that moment. As close as you are to me is how I felt to Paul McCartney.
Wow.
He might as well have been sitting up, next to me. And I thought, that's what we do, and what we're here for, all of us, just to have that moment of reality and truth and the incredible artistry of this person,
Beautiful. We just got a few more questions. 2007, the Gurus are inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. Where were you when you got the phone call?
No idea. I do know my first instinct was to say no.
Why did you want to say no?
Because Aria has never been a friend of mine. I'm not an industry person, and they've never nominated us for any award in our whole career. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, just overlooked
anything,
completely.
Ever,
all right.
ever.
Well, last year you were inducted.
But I've got to say, I was just to explain about the. So the other guys though were, when I said let's not, let's say no, and they're like, oh, well, our family'd like it. Can we say yes? And I was like, oh, okay, all right. So I got up there, and when we got the actual award, I was very moved because I was there with, Mark Kingsmill, who was the drummer at the time, and Brad and Rick, and it's like, wow, we really have done something together, the four of us. It was kind of more of a feeling of like, for us, because you don't get those opportunities very often. We actually look at it yourself and say, what have you done, with your
pat
life?
yourself on the back.
Yeah, it was like that, So the feeling of like, it was something, wasn't it? And even they can't deny it. They had to give us something.
Music journalist Ian McFarlane says, as well as the Hoodoo Gurus having delivered a solid run of rip-roaring albums, I would describe them as one of the great singles bands of the Australian rock and pop era, right up there with the Easy Beats and Mental as Anything.
Wow, that's
Do you
great.
agree with that?
I love it. No, I think we have. Yes, it's obvious. I mean, the songs are stuck around and they've been singles, so yeah, that's obvious. And I'm very proud of that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact, you write these songs, you don't think they're going to,
stick around for as long as they
when you write
have.
them for a start, you write them, literally in your house for yourself, and that's it, and I've stopped long ago, as I say, when I mentioned, when you're thinking about when we made the third album, I was thinking about the public and all that, and that's long gone. Now you're only writing a song because it has to be written, and you don't know where it's going to go. But the fact that it sort of keeps turning up in these different strange locations, like the story about the Canberra, but also, anything where someone just comes up in the street and tells you a story about a song of yours that's been part of their life. Yeah, it's incredible.
In Death Defying, you sing, "All my friends are dead or dying and laughter turns to crying." Australian music lost a legend in August last year. For you, though, you lost a really special soul. Died pretty's
Yeah.
Ron Pino. Talk me through that friendship with Ron, how you met and what over the years that friendship meant to you, because I know you were very close.
Very good friends, yeah. Ron, Brad knew him before me, actually. And
They
'cause-
played music together.
Yes, in Brisbane. And so Brad was his friend. And then around about the time they'd made Doughboy Hollow, and they're making the next album. Is it not Trace? It is Trace. And Ron was having trouble writing the lyrics, and we were friendly. He kind of would ring me up and say, "I need some help with these lyrics. Can you come up?" He was living in King's Cross at the time, and so I'd go up to visit him, and he'd say, "Let's go to the pub." I'm like, "Well, what about lyrics?" I'm like, "Nah, fuck that." And so he was just using me as an excuse, and he just wasn't ready to write these songs. So that was kind of where we bonded, really, and we just, I guess drinking buddies is true, but more, Ron, incredible wit, very funny man, beautiful soul. It was really a thing of respect, and I really, obviously, brilliant artist. Was not to respect.
Yeah.
It's so easy to say that. And he also really liked me because, my music as well. Because Ron had probably people would be surprised to know he loved pop music as well. And I don't embrace the idea of pop music being a separate genre. I just think it's all rock music anyway. But he loved the melody that was catchy and tunes. And he used to always, I'd play him a demo of a new album or something like that, and he was saying, "You bastard, that song can be stuck in my head for days now," and vice versa. We were always showing each other, our work and trying not. You can't really critique it because it's a delicate time when you got demos, so you really got to just pretty much keep your own counsel, but mostly just enjoy what you're hearing and kind of be blown away by the fact that you're getting a preview of something that's going to become other people's lives soon. But no, very good friend. He ended up moving to Melbourne many years later, and then of course when Ron got ill 5 years ago. I was one of the closest people to him and to Charity, his now wife. So I became a trusted insider on that as well. And so I was able to be right there through the whole of his illness. But the best thing about what happened with Ron is, despite his illness, the illness led to him having an epiphany, in the sense that as soon as he got the diagnosis, he stopped drinking that day. Cold turkey. But he always been very creative, despite all his drinking and all that, he was always very creative. But when he stopped drinking, the creativity was even more to the forefront.
Wow.
And also now he felt like, he had something to live for, was A, charity, and B, the new feeling of healthiness. And, despite being unwell, in the big picture, but like he was going to gym, something I'd never imagined in my wildest dreams. So the guy that was drinking because of his, we all have our issues, and, Ron was covering him up with alcohol, and, and the beautiful person came out, in fact, a much more happy person. And I was very, thrilled to see that, and just, to watch his, relationship with Charity blossom. And that's one of the most moving, most important things in my life, actually seeing that. Because he's a very special person and very gifted artist, and someone I miss dearly, very much.
You mentioned you've got symphony orchestra show
yes,
coming up.
Symphony Orchestra, yes.
But what's next for Dave Faulkner? Is there anything you haven't tried that you'd like to? Because you're still not comfortable about the solo album thing, are you? But
no,
is there
Ron always wanted me to do one, so that's something I'd like to do. I mean, not just to honour him, but also because he's right. I should be doing a bloody solo record at some point.
I don't know why you're taking so long. Is there a dance collaboration, a duet, a rock opera, something completely left field you'd like to try?
Yes and no. Not rock opera, but I have been talking about writing a musical theatre piece for a long, long time. I've been working on it for probably about 12 years, and I'm still working on it. That. We have the rights to a famous Australian comic novel, and we are, hoping to bring it to fruition next, 12 months or so. But that may not happen, because it's a bit like saying I'm going to win the lottery, because, you're asking someone to spend a few $1 million to produce a thing that could be worth nothing the next day because people hate it. Still, we'll give it
It's
a shot.
art though, isn't it?
We'll give it a shot.
All right. Now, this is the quick fire round, Dave. You
Okay.
have to answer these
All right.
really
Quickly.
quickly.
Okay, sorry.
Okay?
I can't do
All
that.
right. An Australian 7-inch record you would give all your overseas friends.
An Australian, sorry?
An
7-inch
Australian
record.
7-inch record you would give all your overseas
Ooh,
friends.
well, I mean, really, Strand is pretty good.
Yeah.
You
Seminal.
know, but I'd give them the loved one.
Oh, yeah.
You
the
know,
loved ones.
I love that record. But either one, you know, or died pretty song, you know, easy.
Yeah. First concert you went to without parental supervision.
Elton John at the doing the what do you call it? Goodbye Yellow Brick Road tour in the Wacker.
Charles Fisher said, if you are lucky enough to have Dave Faulkner as a friend, you will have a loyal friend for life.
Well, that's true. You know, I keep my friends very close, and yeah.
He also said you're a very direct friend. If he doesn't like what you're wearing, he'll tell you.
I never criticize. Ron's used to criticize clothing. I don't criticize clothing, but I will tell the truth. I can't lie. That's my problem. I'm not good at lying. You can read it on my face. I get very uncomfortable trying to lie, so I just can't. I don't try. I just try not to say what I'm feeling. That's hard.
Right.
So they can tell that I'm not being honest either. So, you know, it's just difficult.
You haven't got a poker face, Dave Faulkner.
No.
How would you like to be remembered, Dave Faulkner?
By the songs. That's it. That's you. If you know the songs, you know me, because I tell what I'm feeling. You know, they're hidden sometimes, exactly my story, but the essence of me is in there.
Dave, I feel I know you a whole heap better after
Too much.
chatting to you today. Thank you so much for your time here at the Australian Music Vault.
Thank you, Jane.